Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are so glad to have you join us for our virtual Hacking a Career in Space Exploration in partnership with NASA. Our entire team is so excited about this that hopefully that energy is going out there to everyone that's logging on to this. Before we jump into today's exciting conversation and meet friends from NASA, let me share a few quick tips to help you get the most out of this session. You'll notice at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a Q&A button. That's where we'd love for you to share your questions throughout this time together. We will save some time near the end to address many of your questions as we can, but we've actually received a lot of thoughtful questions from you just from registration. So keep that dialogue going because this is supposed to be interactive and you'll actually help guide this discussion. We also want your thoughts and reactions throughout this session, so please set it to everyone, not just the panelists, which I think is the default, because again, we need your energy throughout this, including in emojis. So today's Hacking a Career Symposium marks an exciting milestone for us. In September, NASA and the Hispanic Heritage Foundation joined forces through the signing of a Space Act agreement to leverage HHF's mission in education, workforce, social impact, culture, to make sure NASA and space exploration are at the top of minds in terms of career pathways, sharing of resources, and innovation. Our mission just got beyond what we ever thought was possible. We have always focused on the impact our community can make in our communities, in our country, or in our world, but now we're adding our universe to the potential reach. Our NASA agreement means Latino students in our network will have more chances to connect with NASA's incredible resources, experts, and educational programs. It's about to make space exploration and STEM careers fill within our reach. And we want to see yourself as part of NASA's mission. And that's why we're here today. This is just the beginning of a bigger mission with NASA that we have undertaken. And there is so much more ahead as we bring these NASA opportunities to our community through our programs, workshops, public awareness, and other platforms throughout the year. But right now, we will hear directly from NASA professionals about their work and how they got there, including paths they had to carve out for themselves. I've learned a lot from Quincy Kenneth Soul and our dear friend Ellen Ochoa, who's an astronaut, about the importance of space in our everyday lives here on Earth. The more we know about space and from space, the more safe we are, the more informed we are, the healthier we are, the more healthy our planet is, and the more we can imagine. And the more you can imagine, that means the more you can explore, innovate, and solve. We're at a historic moment, especially our youth, because space activities are providing more opportunity for us now and in the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our out-of-sight moderator, beaming in from the planet Los Angeles, Jessica Herrera. Take it away, Jess.
Thank you so much, Jefe. Hello, everyone. It's fantastic to see how much enthusiasm we have today. We've got a lot of ground to cover and some amazing stories ahead. So let's get right into it, shall we? I'm excited to introduce you to the three remarkable professionals who represent different aspects of NASA's mission and who will share their experiences and insights about building careers in space exploration. So I would like to invite them to join us by turning on their cameras as I'm introducing them. Joining us, we have Ricardo Montenegro, Deputy Division of Chiefs of Logistics at NASA's Johnson Space Center. Rosa Abrigon, Systems Engineer at NASA's Johnson Space Center. And last but not least, we also have Steven Villanueva Jr., Program Scientist at NASA's headquarters, where he serves as Deputy Director of the NASA's Mosaic Program. Thank you so much for joining us and for taking your time to be here today and connecting with our network. I know we have a jam-packed agenda, so let's dive right into it. And so now, as we become prepared for today, one thing that stood out to us, and just before I get started, just remember everyone, feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A section and in the chat. We'll be keeping an eye out and submitting them at the end of our live Q&A. So like I was going back to our panel, I know something that we've noticed or that stood out to us is that you all have a Texas connection. Rosa, Steven, Ricardo, each of you has a piece of your story tied to the Lone Star State. And so we love to start here, right there, hearing a bit about where you grew up, your background, and what kinds of things captured your interest. And when you were young, before this incredible journey to NASA began. So let's rewind a bit and set the scene. How about we start with you, Rosa? Tell us about growing up in Corpus Christi.
Yes, so I grew up in Corpus Christi, but it almost felt like I lived in Mexico. I'm the eldest of three children, and my parents are immigrants from Monterrey, Mexico. When I was little, we would visit once a month when I was a baby growing up. Then we got older, it became less and less, but still just would visit family all the time. It was actually took less time to go visit my family in Mexico than it was for me to go from Corpus to Dallas. So we would constantly go visit family, Thanksgiving, Christmas, anytime. I only spoke Spanish at home. uh, that was the rule. Uh, and I learned English by watching Sesame Street and Electric Company. So, yes, TV is very important for me. uh, when I started school, my parents were wondering how I would do because they only heard me speak Spanish. And the teacher was like, "Oh no, she's fine. She speaks English well." And they're like, "What?" Like, what? I do not even remember when I started speaking English. It just happened. But that's what it is by Sesame Street teaching me English. One thing in Texas schools that you have to do is fill out on the first day of school what is your primary language, speaking language, what language was your first language. So answered it honestly by saying Spanish is my first language, but I now speak English and Spanish. I was automatically put into a bilingual program. But I was well advanced, did well in school. My mom took me out of that program. Well, we changed houses. I went to a new school. First day of school, answered the same questions, and I was put back in the bilingual program. I was moved to another homeroom. I I was helping my classmates with their classwork instead of doing my own. So my mom went to the school, got them to fix it and take me out of the bilingual program because I did not need it. I've been interested in space since I was little. My dad got me a telescope and he would set it up for us in front of our house, and I'd take a look at the stars. So that's a little bit of what it was like growing up in Corpus Christi.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rosa. I know a lot of the our audience today can resonate with your story as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I see someone in the chat there said "Viva Mexico," so I echo that. I will now go move on to Stephen. We're curious about your experience growing up in Dallas, your background, and what were you into as a kid?
Yeah, so I grew up in Dallas. So my ancestors are also from Monterrey, but they came up to Texas before it was Texas. So in our family, we didn't cross the border crossed us. But my grandparents were the generation that, unfortunately, speaking Spanish was not looked on as a good thing. And so they were the generation that decided to stop speaking Spanish and they would stop teaching their kids Spanish. So my grandparents were all fluent, but I come from the generation where we were told not to speak Spanish. So it was a very different experience, I think, going through school, looking one way, but then, not speaking the language was always hard, especially as I got older, not being able to speak the language. But I was very fortunate that all four of my grandparents lived in the state, all lived in Dallas, and all of their kids, so all my aunts and uncles, which meant all of my cousins. I got to grow up with all of my cousins, and there's like 20 something of us from both sides. So that was like very fortunate. I always grew up surrounded by family, surrounded by all of my relatives, which was amazing. Um, so I was very interested in sports growing up. I was convinced that I was going to play for the Dallas Cowboys and the Texas Rangers, and I was going to be a sports superstar growing up. But I loved watching movies about space. Any movie with astronauts in it, I remember loving all of that. And I think a lot of my interest in space came. I got to see an air show when I was younger and see like jet pilots doing tricks. And so I thought, maybe if I could become a pilot someday, maybe I could become an astronaut someday. But from a very young age, always interested in space. Um, more as a wanting to be a traveler than someone who studied space. But yeah, the interest was always there ever since I was a little kid. Never owned a telescope, but would go outside and look up.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I know like there's a couple of us joining that, you know, sometimes the career took them a different place from where they initially thought they were going to be. And so I really appreciate you being here to share this story. And so now we're going to move into Ricardo. How about you? What was life for you growing up and what grabbed your attention back then?
Hello, Jessica, and hello, everyone. So, my name is Ricardo Montenegro. I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas, which is the opposite of Rosa. You know, it's right there on the border. You know, Juarez is right across, and it's almost like a huge Mexican, city in America. So it's a nice little beautiful cultural area, and yeah, I'm a first generation uh, college graduate. In my household, I grew up speaking Spanish. Up to today, we still speak Spanish with my mom, dad, and that's how we communicate. Um, like growing up, I would have never guessed that I was going to work. Never imagined to work in NASA ever. That was completely out of the picture. Um, Growing up, I thought I was going to be exactly what my dad did, an electrician. So as I got older, or as like time progressed and my world started opening up a little bit more, I started looking at other, you know, jobs, industries, and yeah, then with curiosity, I started venturing out to see what else was out there. So from El Paso to the Navy, I joined the Navy as well. I did some time in the Navy, and yeah, I applied at NASA and I got the job, and I'm very happily where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, thank you. And I know you've all taken us back to where it all began. And so I know our audience is curious about how those things, how those early chapters led to the next ones, right? So now I'm going to start off with you, Stephen. We heard glimpses about your life growing up in Dallas, and we love to hear how, Dallas kid found his ways to the stores.
Oh man, that's a crazy and winding journey. I was looking in the chat. Someone was asking what our parents did. I just want to say my father was a construction worker, and my mom worked in logistics, so like telling 18-wheelers where to go. Yeah, growing up, I was always told, if I did good in sports, then I could go to college. Maybe I could get an athletic scholarship. I was fortunate enough to try to go to college um, on academics. Unfortunately, it did not go well for me. I didn't understand how you paid for college or how that worked or how that process worked at all. I didn't understand financial aid. And so I worked 3 jobs while I was in college. I failed all of my classes and dropped out after a year. And instead, I enlisted in the military. So it was kind of like a step back for me, to drop out of college. That really hurt as someone who prided themselves on doing well in school. But then I joined the military and I was able to do 4 years learning how to be a mechanic. So it was a very sort of change of pace, going from studying math to repairing aircraft and aircraft equipment. But it gave me like a lot of self-discipline and mechanical know-how, which was very useful. And it gave me the funding through the GI Bill to pay for school when I decided to get out. And so I had to sort of work my way back through the whole system of going to community college. I had to start from scratch, enroll in my local community college. I was able to get my grades back up, transfer to a 4-year university, to get my degree in physics. And while I was there, I met the people, and I never knew this was a job, the people who built the telescopes to study the stars. Like I didn't know that that was a job that you could do, was like builder of telescope. And as someone who was studying physics and who had just spent the past 4 years fixing aircraft and aircraft equipment, they were like, oh, we would love to have you in our lab. So that was sort of my gateway into astronomy. And then, as I progressed through my career, it was like, well, you have to keep going to school, get your doctorate if you want to be, sort of a professional astrophysicist. And so I just sort of kept along those lines. It just kept going and kept going. When I got to grad school, I continued to build telescopes, but then I learned about discovering planets. The I could see them on the screen here in the background. But I became a planet hunter. I built telescopes and I used my telescope to look for planets. And none of this was planned at all. It was just sort of I would discover an option, a career option that I didn't know existed, as they came along. And some of these, like I don't know if I would have been well suited to be a telescope builder had I not, failed out of school and had to take this other path. Um, but so yeah, it's a weird journey. I don't know if that's the classic way to get to NASA. But I took a lot of detours, some steps back, some steps forward. But I kept with it. I stuck with it. I stayed in school, and then eventually I got to the point where I had enough work experience that when I applied for an opening at NASA to study planets or to look for planets at NASA, I was able to get my foot in the door. But it was a long and very winding journey. It was not a straight path by any means.
No, thank you so much for sharing that, Stephen. And some life happens, right? Like you can't plan everything the next 5 years, life happens and you take a different route. That doesn't mean you're in the wrong path. It's just redirecting you and you never know where it could lead you. And it led you here to us. So thank you for sharing that. I would like to now go to Ricardo from those early interests you told us about through your time. I'm sorry. Um, I would like to now go to, I'm sorry, I am getting myself confused here. So technical difficulties on my end. Ricardo, I would like to hear if you can walk us through your story, through the moments and decisions that shaped your path and some of those defining chapters that brought you here.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, so similar to Stephen, like growing up, I didn't have many options, or at least I didn't know I had many options. My parents, they straight up didn't know anything about college. Um, I At the time I didn't have good mentoring. I didn't even know what that was, or should I reach out to anyone else? So I did what I could with what I knew at the time. So I saw that there was a Navy recruiter telling me, hey, come on, let's go for the next 4 years, and we'll pay for college, and you'll see the world. I was more interested in seeing the world at that point. So joined the military right out of high school, and yeah, that is the defining moment I feel of my career, because at that point I feel like I jumped into the unknown, straight unknown. Let's see where this goes. And from there, I started. It opened up the world for me. I went out to San Diego, started meeting professionals, doing Department of Defense work, traveling to fancy hotel. Well, not fancy, like Holiday in California. It's really nice compared to other areas, right? But no, so I saw a lot. I experienced a lot more in the Navy, and there, as soon as my Navy time was finishing, I had to make a decision. Right? Am I going to go back to school? Am I going to reenlist? What am I going to do at that point? So during that time, my father, who was is an electrician, he opened up his company. You know, he opened up his company. So I said, you know what? I'm going to get a management business degree to help out my dad. So sure enough, I get out of the military. Uh, I go to University of Texas at El Paso, go into the business college, and over time, I talked to more people there, and I realized management degree is not for me. Maybe what I want is an accounting degree, because I want to know how businesses work, financial statements. I want to know more on that aspect. So that was another pivoting point for me. Then from there, I got my degree in accounting. I was ready to join the workforce. But that was what, 2008. I don't know if you guys remember, during that time, there was there was a new president coming in, right? Obama, similar to like right now, there's going to be a new administration coming in. So a lot of jobs were frozen in the federal government. So that kind of killed my momentum to join the federal workforce. So I had to pivot again. So I went to go get my master's degree in business, and paid for by the military. And when I got out and finished that degree, I applied to be an astronaut. Actually, just saw the application come up. I applied to be an astronaut. Then I kept looking at USA Jobs and saw the job that I currently have open, and I just applied. Just at the time I thought it was impossible. I applied, put in my information, and sure enough, They gave me a call, interested, and I interviewed, and boom, that was another very important milestone in my life. And yeah, those were big decisions that shaped to where I'm at today. But the big important things I want to highlight from there is all the people and all those experiences I had to go through to bring me here were very, very important. Like without those experiences of life happening, I would definitely not be here.
No, absolutely, Ricardo. Thank you so much for sharing that as well. And there's kind of a pattern that we're seeing here, right? It's not like you all were like, oh, I'm gonna go to NASA. It's things that happened in your life that led you here, right? And so I would like to now go to Rosa. Rosa, you took us back to your days in Corpus, and now you're here, part of NASA's story. Can you share a little bit about that? Walk us through your journey?
Yes. What we grew up, my family was education is very important. And that's because of what happened to my grandparents. My grandfather was in a car accident when my mother was 12 and he couldn't work anymore. My grandmother had no real work skills. On my dad's side, my grandfather was in Chicago and my grandma was in Mexico with the rest of the family. So she became an entrepreneur trying to sustain the family, support the family. So there was a big push to, hey, education is very important. There's no barriers at all. So in fourth grade, those same teachers where the bilingual program occurred, they're the ones who recommended 2 programs for me to go to for the next years. One of them was a lottery system to a fine art school, and it was only for the 5th grade year. And then another program I needed to test into was for the gifted and talented program for the school district. So I did both and I got accepted to both schools. So I made the decision to go to the gifted and talented program because that continued through middle school, and my local middle school was rated one of the worst in my city. So I did not want to go to that middle school. I wanted to avoid it as much as possible. And my parents were supportive of whatever decision I made. So I appreciated that. And what was weird is when the other parents, when they found out that I was going to this gifted and talented program, they were telling my mom, "Oh, she's gonna fail. She's not gonna do good. If she graduates from high school, blah, 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 blah." And it's just the culture of pulling us down that we are afraid to fail. So don't do it because you might fail. Not encouraging, saying, yes, you can do this. Good luck. We're rooting for you. That was not happening. I didn't even know that that was going on behind the scenes. My mom told me later in life that that's what she was hearing from the parents. So I went through the gifted and talented program, got to my high school. My local classmates, similar story. They were not allowed to um, take more than one honors class freshman year because their parents were afraid they would fail. So my classmates only took one honors class. I took all honors, every single honors class I could take, except if there were scheduling conflicts. Then I took those regular because I had no choice. But my classmates told me, I wish I would have taken all honors, but I listened to my parents. So, parents, if you're on here, encourage your parents, push them that they can do well. I had the mentality of if I don't do well, I can go from an honors course to a regular course, but I can't move from an honors course, a regular course to an honors course if I'm bored out of my mind. So I would rather tell the teachers, hey, take me out of honors because that's the easier approach to it. And I graduated valedictorian of my class because of those extra bonus points that you get from taking an honors class. But I did have to decide in my high school, we didn't have every class imaginable, and I had to choose because they were at the exact same time. Honors AP chemistry with honors AP, well, calculus. Well, I knew I needed calculus for engineering, so I chose calculus over chemistry, the chemistry 2. Chemistry 2 wasn't mandatory for graduation, neither was calculus, but I knew I was going towards engineering, so I had to make a choice based on the way my other classes were other lining up. And it's just Now they offer more classes, but at that time, I didn't think it was a difficult decision to make, but I'm sure the chemistry teacher was disappointed that I didn't take his class. But those teachers encouraged me and helped me in my application process. My calculus teacher is like, well, I went to MIT for college, and he was like, MIT doesn't use calculator, so get away from that calculator. So he was the one trying to help me do better in my class to prepare me for college. But for college, my family didn't have money. Uh, Luckily, MIT is financial need based, so whatever your parents can afford, they match 100%. They just recently announced that if you make 100K or less, you get free tuition, free housing, free everything. And if you make less than 200, between 100 and 200, you get free tuition. So, but a lot of people don't know that about these very expensive schools that they're financial need based, so they don't apply because they can't afford it. Well, I only came out with 6K in student loans. That was it. I my senior year though, I still needed to pay my dorm bill, and so I worked multiple jobs while I was a student because my parents couldn't afford for their contribution, which was my housing, my transportation home, my food. So I worked multiple jobs on campus while I was studying. And I applied to a scholarship through the Society of Mexican American Engineers and Scientists. I went to their international conference my senior year as a member, and I received one of their scholarships. At that right after the banquet where I got the scholarship, there were two NASA representatives who approached me afterwards, and they looked over my resume, and one of them was the representative from Stennis Space Center, and the other person was from KSC. So the Stennis Space Center person came and talked to me, asked me if I would be interested in testing rocket engines at Stennis, and I had to say yes to that and just moved on to the interview process to get to the next person who would eventually be my supervisor. So that's how I was able to come to work for NASA.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rosa. I know it's going to be helpful for a couple of we have high school sophomores on the line that I'm sure appreciate the recommendation that you share with them as well as they're, already setting up for their future. So thank you so much for sharing that. And, you know, you all have provided such a wonderful look into what brought each of you here today. And so, if you could just now walk us through, and I know that the audience is curious about is exactly what here looks like for each of you, right? We love to know about your current roles at NASA. And one thing is to read a title, but another is to actually hear exactly, what excites you to show up to work every day and contribute to space explorations in ways that much people don't always expect. So I am now gonna switch it up and start with you, Ricardo. Often we think of NASA and the spacecrafts and science, but without logistics, nothing really takes off, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about your role at NASA?
Yeah, certainly. So I work in the Center Operations Directorate, who is in charge of making sure the facilities, the utilities, the security, everything in the center is optimal for the engineers and scientists and NASA to meet its mission. So the way you can look at it is the Johnson Space Center. This is where I work at here in Houston. It's a little city, and my role is to ensure that it continues. We have hundreds of buildings on site, and we have thousands of offices and 12,000 people that work on site. So that's a lot of people moving back and forth. Furniture has to be moved around. The lights have to turn on. People break things. It has to be repaired. So if these personnel cannot work within their facilities that we provided them, they can't do their job. And if they can't do their job, it's going to impact the NASA mission. So that's my role here in NASA. I work in logistics. My responsibilities are the shipping and receiving of everything that goes in and out the Space Center. Any movement here in the center or somewhere else worldwide. We have supply. We're in charge of purchases for the whole center, warehousing of all those items, equipment. We're in charge of tracking all the equipment that we purchase. I think right now it's like at $2 billion worth of equipment that we have to manage. All the government vehicles that we use on site, and all export control. So anything that is being shipped outside of the country, we have to ensure that it doesn't fall in the wrong hands. So we have a team here that actually looks at what's being shipped out, who it's going to, and they ensure that it can legally leave the country. So that's some of what I do. In addition, I do a contract oversight here. Well, in NASA in general, we work with a lot of contractors, and they support us in our missions. And I have, in my role right now, I have to ensure that the contractor that we have is meeting all their contractual requirements. So with that, I have to work with finance, a lot of financial personnel, lawyers, and just contract personnel, with other companies. In a nutshell, Jessica, that's what I do.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. And all of that is important to the work, right? And it's a big, large team, so every piece is important for the bigger picture. So I really appreciate you walking us through your role and what you do. And do you want to add on to something?
Yeah, and I want to add on. So the big important thing that I wanted to point out here is that in running a city, you have a lot of disciplines. We have structural engineers, architects, security officers, logisticians, everything you could find out in a big city, you can work for NASA here at this center. I want to point that out.
No, thank you. So everyone, anyone in your career that you're all looking to do in your lives, think of NASA. They have that too. Think of NASA as an option as well. So just putting it out there. And so I'm now going to move on to Rosa. I would like to hear from you. Could you share with us what your role today is all about? What drives you into your work, and what parts of it excite you the most?
Yes, so as a system engineer, it's really about integration, putting all the different pieces together. Do they connect? How do they interface? And it's not just at the component level. It's also with different programs and collaborating together. One of my projects, I work with ESA, the European Space Agency. They're the ones who were installing the engine that I worked with the procurement team and the lawyers to get a contract in place for this engine that gets built in the US but installed in Germany. So I got to go to Germany for one of those reviews. And it's coordinating, communicating with the European Space Agency and make sure we get their requirements met as well as our requirements. We have people who are working with JAXA, the Japanese space agency. So there's a lot of moving pieces and parts for different projects, and that's what a system engineer is. And there are different levels of system engineering: component level, subsystem level, programmatic level. There's all different reaches, but it's being able to visualize all the moving pieces, the connecting pieces, and bringing it together. And there's different tools that people can use in order to do that. It's about problem solving, seeing things at a bigger picture, not just at a narrow focus. And it's that creativity and innovation that people need. And engineering is about problem solving. And you need that creativity. So the more creative you are, we actually need those type of people to come up with the solutions. How can we connect these pieces together? Currently, officially, temporarily, I am the deputy project manager for Chapia, and Chapia is a 3D printed habitat where we just had a crew who was 4 people who were there for 378 days to simulate what it's like to be on Mars. And it's also a food study to see how nutrition affects their performance. Well, I am helping prepare the facility for the second mission in 2025. So my role is to help with the integration of the new hardware that we have to install for the next mission, and just other facility updates that have to happen. So I am integrating with the facility. So even though I'm a deputy project manager, my system engineering skills come into play. So it's your skill set is easily transferable from one job to the next. The job title is just the title, the title, that's it. But the key skill sets easily transfer from one job to another. Communication skills, writing skills, collaboration, teamwork. That's what a system engineer, project manager needs to have. Um, Budgeting, your schedule, risk management. There's just so many skill sets that are transferable from one job to the next. And that's what's so amazing is that with this position, I can be very flexible just by saying I am a system engineer and I can do basically anything.
Thank you so much, Rosa, for sharing. I know we have a lot of questions coming in, so I know we're answering them through the chat. I mean, not through the chat, but as you're responding to the questions. So, any of those that we missed, we were going to answer them in the Q&A section. Just want to quickly highlight those. We're acknowledging the questions coming in, and we are answering as we go. So I would like to now move on to you, Stephen. Let's would love to know, what does your work at NASA look like, and what is the heart of the work that you do? What makes you think this is why I do this?
Yeah, so thank you. So I came into NASA as a scientist, as an astronomer. And so my day to day was very different than what it is now. But when I first came in, I sat at my computer and I would download data from the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, which is TESS, which is one of NASA's many space satellites that's used to hunt for planets. And so my day to day was very much, downloading data and then writing a lot of code to sift through those millions and millions of images and millions of pixels to look for signals that might be caused by a potential planet. And then a big part of that was then coordinating with other scientists around the world. So like Rosa was mentioning, teamwork, collaborating with other people, working as a group to sort of coordinate other telescopes to go investigate these potential signals that might be planets to determine if they were real. So a lot of that was collaboration, working with other people, but there was also a lot of like hardcore coding skills and math that went into my day to day. And then recently I got promoted, that I'm really happy about. But now I work on the policy and sort of grant side. So I work sort of in the science management side. So now I work on the side at NASA where we give out the grants. And again, this is a very similar, like Rosa was saying, a lot of my skill set translated over. So now I'm working with a group of administrators, but also financial people to sort of understand, in particular with my program, Mosaics, we're trying to understand where NASA has failed to give funding in the past. So we're looking at community colleges and rural schools, Hispanic serving institutions. What are the types of schools that historically NASA has overlooked? Where are there sort of diamonds in the rough sort of thing? And so it's using my same data collection skills, but it's on financial data and demographic data, geographic data, but it's applying those same skill sets. Like Rosa said, your skills are transferable no matter what your title is. And as someone who's recently had a job title change, I can attest to it. It's using those skills in a brand new setting. But I'm working with people and I'm working with team members. And for me, the heart of it is I get to help other people. And that's my new job. I'm no longer doing the astronomy, but I get to help other people become astronomers, become engineers, become earth scientists and planetary scientists. So I support all of the different science that happens at NASA, not just astronomy, but people who study the sun or the planets in our solar system, or even our own Earth. And so for me, it's transitioned from discovery space to sort of helping others and opening doors where doors were previously held shut. And for me, that's the heart of it all right now.
Thank you so much for your work, Stephen, and for opening those doors like you mentioned. And, the rest of our panelists too, your stories and sharing that with our network. I see a lot of in the chat saying, they're thankful for hearing your experience and what you all going through, because it's going to help them. And I know we have teachers on the line with their students as well. So it's very important that the work that you're all doing and being able to share that with our network today. So I want to take an opportunity to thank you. And so before we move on as we move on to the next section is, I think it's safe to say that many of our audience are inspired right now, thinking about how they might embark on a similar journey, as we were mentioning, and they might be wondering, could I do that? What would it take? So whether they're students just exploring their options or professionals thinking of a change, I would like to take some time now to draw directly from your own experience, those lessons that might make someone's journey a little easier, more informed, and more confident, right? So, Rosa, thinking back to when you were just starting out, what do you wish someone had told you about getting into this field?
Well, I didn't realize there were other schools that had aerospace engineering degrees. I only could think of MIT. And this was like right at the start of the internet. I know I'm dating myself, but now you have the internet. You are exposed to a lot more schools and what programs they have to offer. My local colleges in the area did not have an engineering degree. University of Corpus Christi, there was no engineering degree. I don't even think they had a chemistry or physics. The local one is UT Kingsville, and that was only mechanical engineering. So I didn't really know what there was out there. Um, so now there's a lot more information. So I do encourage students to see what schools are available in their area. Parents, let your kids leave the house. Uh, I was not supposed to leave the house till I was married, and I definitely just it's a cultural thing. But my cousins in Monterrey, Mexico have great universities to choose from, so they didn't have to leave the house till they were married to go to a great school. But I had to leave the house because there was nothing near me in order to have the educational opportunity that I was interested in. Um, but uh, Also, when you try and get hired on, there's people from multiple different universities. You don't have to go to the name school that everyone's trying to get to. We have people from who went to UT Austin, UT Knoxville, Illinois, different all the California schools, just all kinds of different schools, even UTEP. There's a lot of agreements going on with the students at UTEP. So NASA does try and reach out with certain schools to work with them and and promote and for interns to come work for us on the different programs and do a lot of outreach. So the opportunities are for students at any school to come then work for NASA. You're not limited to just, oh, only if you go to these schools can do you have the opportunity. So just apply to the schools that interest you with the major you're interested in. And there's a lot more options out there than I knew about. So go look into them.
Thank you so much, Rosa, for sharing your experience. Very important. And I would like to now move on to Stephen. Let's hear from you. I know that being a first generation college student must have come with its own challenges and opportunities. What is some advice you wish you could have given your younger self as you're charting your own path in STEM?
Yeah, I think, the hardest part about getting through STEM and getting to NASA was just paying for college. You know, getting the money to go to college was much harder than actually, getting admitted or, the classes and the job that I do today. I wish I could go back and educate my younger self on all of the resources that are out there. I wish I knew about the Hispanic Heritage Foundation when I was younger. I wish I knew about all of the opportunities that were there. And then I would tell my younger self um, to sort of prioritize the people. It's the people who are going to connect you, the people who, like your professors and your advisors, those first people who are going to give you those first job opportunities. You rely so much on their experience, but also their empathy, their ability to sort of, to look after you and to help you get to that next step. Your teachers, your professors, all of those people play such a huge role in supporting you. There's family support, there's people support, but like the people who are going to support you, emotionally, physically, but also just getting and that financial support. But it's so hard to do this without support and without help. You really have to do it with other people. Um, and so I would go back and just tell my younger self that you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to, push through this all by yourself. And I would tell my younger self to learn to reach out for help and to find those people.
Absolutely. That's a very great advice. And, for everyone on the line, take advantage of those opportunities, submit those questions, submit those chats. We have these speakers here who are able to share more and be helpful in your journey. So I will move on now to Ricardo. You've navigated quite the journey towards leading logistical operation at NASA. I imagine there might have been moments when you were making big decisions without really knowing what may lay ahead. And for those interested in logistics or any other equally essential non-STEM field that contribute to NASA's mission, what advice would you give about the following to those interests, following those interests?
So, the big advice that I would give to someone looking for non-STEM careers in NASA is just, you know, whatever you choose to do, just be good at it. Um, like I said earlier, you could do anything in NASA. You could do whatever you could think of. We do it here. We just call it something fancy or something nice. But yeah, just whatever you do, commit fully, and understand. Just like Steven said, there's a lot of people that are willing to help you. You just have to look for them. You have to find them. One of the big things that I feel like has really helped out my career and my life is finding those mentors. You know, and I talk to my wife about this all the time. But if you're the smartest, if you feel like you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You need to go talk to, other people who've gone before and, been through all these experiences. That way you could leverage off their experiences. So that's the advice I would give myself. If I just like the previous panelist questions, I would give that advice to myself, to younger self. But with that said, just be the best at what you're at. Whatever you choose to do, be the best at it, and find your niche wherever it's at.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. And it's important to keep highlighting that, there are non-STEM careers opportunities at NASA. And I've been sharing in the Q&A section that link where you're able to see those careers. And I know we have a lot of folks asking about internships opportunities and all of that. So I'm sharing them there, but we're also going to follow up after today's events with the recording and all those resources. So you have that available. So just something to keep in mind, right? So thank you so much for highlighting that, Ricardo. And we'll be moving to the last section of the panel discussion before we move to the Q&A. So I know the audience is taking all the notes. So we've looked at the past and the present of your journeys, and I want to think a little bit about the broader future. We'd like to hear from each and one of you what excites you the most about the future of space exploration, and what kinds of opportunities you see emerging. What does the future look like, and how can people in our audience from the different part be a part of that future? So Rosa, I would like to start with you. From your perspective, what are some exciting challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for people who want to get involved in space exploration?
Well, now is a very exciting time with going to Moon and Mars. This is a great time to start, uh, continue your passion for space and be a part of it. And it's not just directly with NASA. NASA hires so many contractors and they work with commercial companies in procurement contracts in order to achieve the combined goal of going to the Moon and Mars. We have partnerships with delivering supplies to the International Space Station. We have also contracts for sending crew to the International Space Station, and we are working on we have contracts in place for going to other GFE commercial furnish equipment with these commercial companies. So if it's not just necessarily with NASA, but just the space community as a whole. NASA helps and mentors and provides guidance to these commercial companies. We do have subject matter experts here at NASA, and we like to share that knowledge with our commercial partners, Axiom, um, SpaceX, Boeing. There's just so many relationships that are forming, and so you don't have to just it just has to be NASA and only with NASA. Before, that was the only really company for you to work for if you were interested in space. But now there's so many different companies and it's still part of the NASA community. So that's what makes it so exciting is that there's so many opportunities to be a part of the space industry. It just may not be what you think it is, but the opportunities are out there and that's what makes it so exciting for this new generation of students.
Thank you so much, Rosa, for sharing that amazing glimpse of what the future holds. So I would like to now move on to Ricardo from the logistical side of things. What are you seeing as the big opportunities for the next wave for NASA?
So I mean, for me in particular, in my field, we need facilities. We need facilities to run optimal. Everything's getting more expensive, so we have to find better and new ways to conduct business here on Earth. So there's plenty of opportunity for our facilities, environmental security, everything. Like I said earlier, that you could do at a city, you 100% could do it at NASA because we're not going anywhere for a while. We have to go to Mars, so we'll be here. Um, but one thing I wanted to add was to prepare yourself for these opportunities, you yourself have to be multidimensional. One of the big things nowadays in the workforce is you have to you have to learn how to do a lot of things, not just one thing. So I mean, I'm not saying go out and learn everything, but during time, as time progresses, you're gonna have opportunities to do things, volunteering. Hey, can you help me out with this coding or with this project here? Or always jump to volunteer to do new things because you never know if that's going to lead you to an opportunity with NASA at one point. So that's my big secret and advice. Do everything, always volunteer, and be open to do anything.
That is a great advice, right? Learning, being able to have a little bit of background of different things is always helpful. And I hope, the audience is taking notes of that as well. And so we're going to be wrapping up this segment with you, Stephen. When you think about the future of space exploration, what gets you the most excited?
Oh, there's so much to get excited about. So as a planet hunter, I'm very excited about the future of, what we're going to be finding in space. So I worked on the test mission, which is finding thousands upon thousands of potential planets out there. But we have that followed up with the James Webb Telescope, which is going to begin investigating the most promising planet candidates that we have for the potential of biosignatures. Like we might know, in the next decade or two, if there are signs of life on other planets. There are things like the Europa Clipper mission that are going to go explore and look for signs of life in our own solar system. Like this is so exciting that we are sort of on the verge of being able to sort of understand or answer those questions. That is just like so exciting to me that we're like that close. Um, the Roman telescope will launch later this decade, and it's another large survey telescope. And in terms of opportunities, like we are going to be collecting more data than we know what to do with, and we're going to have to get smarter about how we do things, and that's coding better, being more efficient with how we handle data. I think that there are so many opportunities to get involved on the computer science side or the coding side of things, not just the technical side. Building all of these things is a challenge. Systems engineers like Rosa, we need people like that. When we need people like Ricardo to sort of make it all happen, and so working together, and then I think the Habitable World Observatory is on the distant horizon. That's a project that isn't supposed to launch till the 2040s. So for the younger people in this room, you could make a career out of being a part of a project like that that's going to go into the 2040s. And so I just think that's the most exciting thing for me is that we are so close to getting to be able to have the first glimpses of being able to say whether or not we are alone in the universe. And there's nothing that excites me more than that.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And thank you all to your panels for sharing all your advice and all your background as to what led you here in NASA. We've had a fantastic conversation so far, so I'm excited to shift gears one more time to dive into some of the questions that the audience has. And we've been getting some of those amazing questions coming through the Q&A and also a few that were submitted ahead of time. So we will try our best to get through as many. So let's jump right in. First up, to kick us off with our Q&A section, I love to share a question that came to us in video form during registration. So why don't we take a look?
Hello, my name is Umar Calves Alfonso. I am originally from Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, and I am an HHF Youth Awardee in the engineering category. I am also an aerospace engineering major at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. And my question for you is, what factors do you consider to be important to stand out as an applicant when applying to internship/co-op positions at NASA? Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And before we started off, I would just want to thank everyone on the audience who registered and submitted their questions. And so I would now like to open it up to one of our panelists to jump in. I'm not sure. I know they mentioned space engineering, so I don't know, Rosa, if you want to kick it off before Ricardo and Steven jump right in.
Yeah, yeah, I can kick it off. First off, I want to make people aware that NASA's co-op program is called Pathways. So if you are doing a search for the program, NASA does not call it co-op, it's Pathways. Um, that in order to become a Pathways or a co-op, you apply through the USA Jobs website like you would any other federal employee instead of the intern website. So NASA has different programs. The regular internship programs where it's a semester one and done, and then there's the Pathways co-op program where you are a federal civil servant. So there are two different application methods in order to become part of the NASA team. For the pathways, one thing that we recommend for students to do in the resume is to have a narrative format resume, which is very different than your bullet point resume that you're used to seeing because they get lots and lots of resumes. So they want you to tell your story, write it out in sentences. And one thing that they tell you to do is include any obstacles you've overcome. What were some of the issues you had in your project? And even your class project if you haven't had a job during the summer. What were some of the issues that your team had to encounter, and what was your how did you resolve that? What obstacles did you overcome? How did you do it? What lessons did you learn? And that's what, as Pathways student, we try and tell students in the resume for how to make them stand out. It's that narrative format resume. Very different than anything you hear from any other company when it comes to applying for NASA, but that is the key. And it does, like, if you do not have a lot of work experience, bring those class projects in your resume. That's what's going to get you a better chance to become part of the NASA team.
Thank you, Rosa. And I know, Steven, you work this more indirect with the field that you do and your job at NASA. Anything else you would like to add?
I think Rosa covered most of it, but it's those skills that you have that are, and Ricardo said it too, like saying yes to things and trying new things are going to build sort of. I say it's your toolbox, right? It's all the things that you can do, and it's you have the chance in that resume and that narrative to explain all the different skills that you have, because your skills can be used, for many different positions, for many different jobs. Many of us on this call have pivoted, taken our skills and done something new and different. So it's about, for me, emphasizing those skills, and because you can always use them for whatever job you're applying to. And so it's sort of catering the skills that you do have through those opportunities you've had, those class projects, for the job specifically for the job that you are applying to, right? That resume that should look different for every job you're applying to, right? Because it should be specific to how do your skills and all of the things in your toolbox, how do they apply to that job? That's my advice.
Thank you so much. And we are going to dive right into the rest of the questions that we've received, and they vary, right? So we have broken them down into breaking into NASA, career transitions and growth, and working at NASA. And I know we are at time, so I'm just going to ask two more questions, and then So for the audience, don't worry, we have a special treat that I'm going to announce towards the end, but break what I know you talked a little bit about it, but it would be helpful to know for those in the audience is what is the interview process like for you and how did you prepare?
So I came into NASA through the the NASA postdoctoral program, which was an application process where I had to submit like a research application. Interestingly, I don't think there was an interview process. I think it was I submitted my application packet and my research packet and the research I wanted to do. But when I got my current position, there was a job interview, and for that one, I really studied the job ad. What were the things that they were asking of in the job? They said they needed someone who did X, Y, and Z, and so I studied those questions in the job ad, and I thought about all the things that I had done up until that point, even if it was remotely related to X, Y, or Z. And I had like a little sheet of paper with notes on, how can I explain this other thing that I did and how it might help me for this specific job. And again, it's all about tailoring, all of the amazing things that I've done to this thing because the person who's hiring, they're looking for someone who can do X, Y, and Z. And so I just needed to explain to them how I could do those things or how the things that I've done in the past, even if I hadn't done it yet, but how the things I had done in the past could help me be better prepared for that. And that's how I prepare for my job interview.
Thank you, Stephen. And I'm sure Ricardo and Rosa had a different experience. I'm not sure if you want to share a little bit about that. I see Ricardo unmuted himself.
Yes, because I've interviewed plenty. So I got my initial NASA interview. Then over my career here in NASA, I've had to interview more times for other jobs and promotions. So it's as soon as you get in, it's still very competitive to keep moving up your career. But so what I do to prepare is first and foremost I read the application or the job listing. Then there's the requirements which you have to meet. Then you have the duties that what you're going to be doing, what it's about. So how I prepare is first and foremost meet those requirements, prove that I can meet those requirements. Upload that information. Then for the requirements state that I have to be able to do some sort of task. Well, I prepare using the STAR method. This is a very common interview job method, job search method. It's situation, task, action, and result. So be prepared to explain in the interview what the situation was that you fixed or you did or had anything to do with the requirements. Uh, the task, what you did, what you had to do, the action, what you did, then the result, how it all turned out. Now, you might not have experience with that specific job, requirement, but you can use a similar experience in your lifetime that you feel meets that requirement. So that's how I prepared. Then for the actual interview, everyone's going to be nervous, everyone. So just tell the truth, tell your story, 100%. Do not say anything that might be perceived as untrue, and you will be fine. That's how I prepared, Jessica.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Ricardo. Anything you would like to add, Rosette?
Well, since the question was more from a college student, one thing Pathways does is they announce, at least when I was helping students a couple years ago and for Pathways, was there's a list of competencies in the job announcement. And one of the first steps to advance to the next round is to take a competencies assessment. So in the interview process, they tend to focus on those competencies to because your grades are your grades. They already know you can do the task. But what makes you different than all the other candidates are these competencies, and the questions are geared towards that. I have not been on an interview panel for pathway students to know other than what we have been notified about the interview process, and that the questions are geared towards the competencies, and that is in, at least when I was promoting it in the job announcement, the list of competencies. So do take a look at those. Like they mentioned, read the read the job announcement and read the job announcement, and that's in there.
That is very important. Make sure everyone is reading what you're applying for. Make sure that you do qualify and you are submitting everything that you have to submit. I know we have come to the time to end our panel today, but I will say I have a special surprise here at HHF, and thanks to our panelists. But I'm truly inspired by all the insights and stories that our speakers have shared. I want to give a special thanks to Ricardo, Rosa, Steven for sharing your time and your stories with us. You've definitely given our audience a lot to think about, not just about careers and space exploration, but just about believing in themselves, in ourselves, staying open to new opportunities. And if there's one thing that we hope everyone takes away from today is that NASA needs people like you. And so thank you all to the audience for being here and for bringing your curiosity. I wish we had more time to get through all of your questions live. However, I do have some exciting news. Like I've been mentioning, our speakers will be answering more of your questions in the weeks ahead. So make sure to stay connected with us. We will be sharing those insights and answers, and there is more to come. So we're very excited to keep this conversation going, and we can't wait to share more with you. So as mentioned, this event marks just the beginning of our journey with NASA through our Space Act agreement. So stay tuned for more events, resources, and opportunities coming your way from HHF and NASA. And on behalf of everyone from the Hispanic Heritage Foundation and our friends at NASA, thank you for joining us today. We hope you leave today inspired with the knowledge that there is a place for you in this journey. And until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep reaching for the stars.